Welcome back to my channel. I'm Solace if you're new here. If you're not new here, welcome back. It's great to have you again. Today's video is going to be talking about my ears and what's wrong with them. So I want to start this out by establishing that on paper, I have perfectly fine hearing. I've had a hearing test a few different times now, and they've always come back perfectly normal. Now let's talk about what I actually hear when I listen to different things. So I've always had, my family would joke, selective hearing, in that there always seemed to be certain things that I just sort of never heard. But about 6 months ago, it started getting pretty bad. My ears would ring pretty much constantly. My left ear would randomly cut out completely and I would hear no sounds in it, like, you know how when you go like that and you can hear yourself touching your ear? I wouldn't even hear that. Anytime I was anywhere there was any kind of background music or background noise, every single sound was indistinguishable. I don't know if the fact that I was working in a small noisy coffee shop made worse problems that I already had or brought out new ones that I didn't know I had, but I do know it became incredibly difficult to do my job the longer I was there, and in the end I did leave. Not specifically because of the hearing, but that was a factor for me at least. Since then, my hearing has improved to some degree. I am now capable of hearing things that I wouldn't have been able to before. I can be in a room where multiple people are talking and more or less follow a conversation, though it does become tiring after a while because it does require more focus than it would if we were in a quiet room. My taste in music also changed around that same time because before then I used to really love a lot of jazz, a lot of big bands, and those are very difficult to listen to when your brain stops letting you distinguish between different noises. After a while, most music I'd used to listen to just sort of sounded like white noise, combined with the fact that I listened to a lot more male singers than female singers, and I began losing the ability to clearly hear men's voices specifically, but women's voices still remained relatively clear. I slowly transitioned more and more into more one singer and maybe a few instrumental bit of folk music over my original jazz that I used to like so much. My hearing doctor that I went to get my ears tested at suggested that I try auditory therapy and recommended some websites online. And while that has helped, as I mentioned earlier when I talked about having a conversation in a crowded room of people, it's not necessarily that it's made the problem go away so much as me found ways to compensate for it. So in that crowded room, I can make out most of what's being said, not because I can hear it, but because I'm taking the words that I'm capable of hearing with that focus, mixed with other context clues of what's going on around me, and I'm mishmashing together what I think that person said. Hence why it's so tiring after a while, because I don't necessarily actually know what that person said. What's most frustrating about this is now that most of my other health problems have either improved to the point where they're not an issue at the moment, or more or less disappeared, I don't necessarily know that any more is going to be looked into regarding my hearing, since that initial test came back normal, and an MRI of my brain revealed no abnormalities on the parts of my brain that have to do with processing my hearing, which is very frustrating. I really wish they would have found something in a sense, because it's very difficult to go through life not being able to hear and not being able to just tell people, oh, I have hearing problems, because technically I don't, and I feel like saying that is a lie. But I also am incapable of understanding 50% of men, anybody with an accent, certain women, and anyone if there's any kind of background noise. Despite me talking a little bit now like this is a pretty recent problem, I do want to mention that I did always struggle to understand people with accents, to varying degrees, though it is much worse now than it was when I was in high school. A prime example with this would be the fact that I can't pronounce pretty much most names from any kind of foreign show, which is especially weird because I watched a lot of anime, both dubbed and subbed, and there's names that I still to this day can't say. Famously, when I first met my fiance, we were talking about the show Naruto, and there is a character in that show who is blonde, with mouths on his hands, that many of you may know the name of. Let me tell you how I say that name. Deidara. I now know that's not right, but when I hear his name said, that's what I'm hearing. There's other characters from that show and many others that I could point to as examples, but I don't think anybody just wants a video of me going through incorrectly pronouncing fictional characters' names. even though that could be quite a long video if I went through and just did the ones that I know of, let alone the ones that I don't. Let alone if I'm watching a show that is subbed or that is strictly in another language. I watch a lot of Chinese dramas lately, and I couldn't tell you a single character's name from it. Not because I don't know what that name looks like written down, but because I can't pick out when they're saying it and try and figure out how it's said at all. Which is really frustrating because if I want to try and talk about this show or tell somebody about this show, I kind of can't. Or I can't name anybody, at least. I have to try and talk around names. And before anybody starts thinking it's only, Chinese and Asian things that I struggle with, I'd like to point to some French things that I also can't say. So, I'm planning on making a robe de la Francie and a robe de l'Angelaise. I don't know how either of those are actually said, and I don't know how incorrect my pronunciation is, because that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm hearing sounds like to me. And I know that's at least somewhat wrong. And as somebody who's very into historical sewing and would love to delve into more non-European costuming, one of the things that makes me really nervous, in addition to, certain things being very difficult to research, is the fact that I know I'm going to say almost everything wrong. I feel like it might bother me less if I had a medical thing that I could point to and be like, listen, I'm not just saying I can't hear what you're saying. I literally can't, and here's why. But the simple fact of the matter is, as of right now, there is no known reason as to why I can't hear these words. And it's very easy to go, oh, it's just in your head. You just don't think you can say it. Or for people to go, oh, it's because you're stressed out, or you just don't want to say it correctly. A thing I literally got about how I mispronounced a word once. Regardless of where my other medical-related problems stand, this is one that I'd like to keep pursuing if my doctors would allow me. I actually even have a specific condition in mind that I'd like to ask for. I haven't done extensive research, so I'm not going to give you, a detailed explanation. But shortly before the quarantine began, I learned of a condition called auditory processing disorder. Of auditory processing disorder that you get just from, basic medical sites like the Mayo Clinic when you do an initial Google search and don't read too much into it, which admittedly is all the more I've read into it because I don't want to over-research this and go to the doctor acting like I feel like I know what's wrong with me when I don't. Is an inability or difficulty to understand speech, particularly when there's a lot of feedback or background noise, which sounds very similar to what I'm dealing with. Do I know that's what I have? No. I'm not going to say that I'm self-diagnosed with it because I'm not even that. It is a thing that I feel like is a relatively strong possibility. Then again, I once had a doctor tell me that the only reason I'm having these problems is because I took too much aspirin when I was dealing with another medical issue, which apparently a side effect of is ringing. I learned that the hard way when I once took so much aspirin that my ears rang for 3 days straight. 10 out of 10, do not recommend. Leave off on a hopeful note, though. I do seem to be coping with it better than I was 6 months ago. I went to the store the other day with my fiance, and there were times, even when his back was turned to me, that I was able to more or less understand what he said and continue on with a conversation. It's still significantly easier when he's looking at me, but it's good to know that I've improved enough that he can not be looking at me and me still understand at least a percentage of what he said. I'm hoping sometime in the next few months to be able to post an update to this video talking about either what actually turned out to be wrong with me or explaining what happened that caused this. I also saw online somewhere that there can be migraines that mess with your hearing, and that part can just stick around sometimes. And apparently that can last for a good few years and then it just goes away one day. I do also suffer from migraines, so it's also a possibility that I've just been having a migraine mess with my hearing for the past 6 months, I guess. I don't know out there because there's a level of uncertainty and almost shame in talking about what's wrong with you when you're undiagnosed. You feel like you can't say that something's wrong because technically on paper nothing's wrong, and so you should just be trying to cope. Right? It's fine when you first start having problems and you're undiagnosed because, everybody has sympathy for you then and everybody wants to try and help you for the most part. But once it's been a couple months and you're still just incapable of coping, you feel like kind of if something were wrong, they would have found it by now and you just need to move on with it. And the simple fact of the matter is a lot of problems take many years to diagnose, and all we can do is try and hang in there in the meantime. So that's what's wrong with my ears, and when you hear me mispronounce things in the future, please try and bear with me. Feel free to let me know what I'm saying wrong. I don't take offense to it. I usually know when I'm saying something wrong, but not always. Especially with names, I can mispronounce them for years, and if nobody corrects me, I'll never know. So please, 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 I encourage you to correct me and let me know, and I will do my best to try and fix my pronunciation where I can. So until... Sorry this video was a little rambly. I really hope some of you were able to get something out of this, whether that was, support of hearing somebody express a condition like you, or the knowledge that it's fine to talk about what's wrong with you, even if you're not diagnosed, or, you just like listening to people on the internet rant. I hope you were able to get something out of this. If you were, please let me know in the comments and give this video a thumbs up. I hope to see you again next week. Until then, this has been Solace, and bye-bye.